I sat in the dim light of our nearly empty living room, the silence broken only by the steady hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of city life beyond our windows. And as I stared at the final email notification flashing on my laptop screen, a message confirming what I had feared most, I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. Tomorrow, our flight was scheduled for departure, a promise of a new beginning painted in dazzling hues by Lena's assurances of a life-changing promotion overseas. Yet now, every instinct in my body screamed that something was terribly wrong. I quickly clicked through the email, my eyes scanning frantic messages and attached documents that confirmed my worst suspicions. The job that Lena had promised me didn't exist. It was a fabrication designed solely to secure our move. As I navigated through bank statements and digital records, the reality became unavoidable. Our savings had been drained, empty to fund her secret escape with her lover, and every single thing I had painstakingly built was slipping through my fingers. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the betrayal that now defined my world. In that heavy moment of realization, I was presented with choices that would determine the course of my next actions. Should I call her immediately, demanding an explanation, or should I take a step back, scrutinizing every piece of evidence to build an irrefutable case? The interactive voice in my mind asked me, confront her now, or gather more proof? I hesitated, my hand hovering over my phone as I weighed the options. The rational part of me, honed by years of financial discipline and quiet resolve, insisted on saving every document, printing them out, making digital backups, to ensure that when I did confront Lena, I would have every shred of evidence at my disposal. And yet, another part of me screamed to shout her name into the phone, to demand answers, and to break through the deception with raw emotion. I chose to scrutinize the evidence further, knowing that a confrontation fueled by raw anger might leave me vulnerable and less prepared to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Every document I reviewed added another layer to the intricate tapestry of her betrayal, and I methodically saved copies of bank transfers, digital receipts, and even encrypted chat logs that revealed transactions I had never authorized. I could almost hear the interactive prompt in my mind, press 1 to call her now, or press 2 to continue gathering evidence. I pressed 2 in my mind, steeling myself for the long road ahead. In that quiet solitude, I began to understand that Lena's betrayal was not a sudden twist of fate, but the culmination of years of small deceptions. Late nights with unexplained phone calls, hurried business trips that never quite added up, and even minor details like an unusually expensive dinner receipt from a place I had never heard of. Each seemingly insignificant anomaly now converged into a devastating reality. Lena had meticulously planned to leave me behind, selling every asset I thought we shared in preparation for a new life abroad with her lover. The irony was bitter. I had trusted her with every fiber of my being, believed in the promises of our future, and even sold cherished possessions to fund our overseas move, only to discover that it was all a cruel ruse. As I sat there, reviewing the evidence with the precision of a man who had learned not to trust easily, a sense of determination began to replace the initial shock. I made a mental note. I would not let this betrayal go unanswered. I would gather every piece of irrefutable evidence and use it to reclaim control of my life, even if it meant dismantling everything Lena had built with my own hands. The room, now cold and empty, felt like a mausoleum of my shattered dreams. Every memory of laughter, every promise made in hushed tones during happier times, was now tainted by the reality of her deception. My thoughts raced as I recalled the interactive moments of decision-making that now lay before me. Should I immediately confront Lena on the phone, demanding an explanation and risking a public scene before our flight? Or should I continue my quiet investigation, ensuring that I had every possible advantage when the time came for my counterattack? I knew that every moment of delay could potentially allow her to further solidify her new life overseas, but the need for a complete, airtight case outweighed the impulsive urge for immediate confrontation. In that moment, I resolved to let the evidence speak for itself. Each printed document and saved email would be a weapon in my arsenal against the woman who had betrayed me. With trembling hands, I began printing out every document I had collected, the whir of the printer serving as a grim soundtrack to my unraveling world. I arranged the pages in meticulous order on our dining table, now transformed into a war room where the battle for my future would be fought. As I scanned each page, I felt the betrayal intensify, but so did my resolve. I realized that this was not the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter in which I would reclaim my life piece by piece, dollar by dollar, trust by trust. I drafted a plan in my mind. First, to secure all the evidence and financial documents, then to consult with a trusted lawyer who had always stood by my side, and finally to confront Lena with the cold, hard truth of her actions. Every step had interactive choices. Every decision would shape the course of my retribution. I could almost see the prompts. Press 1 to contact your lawyer now, or press 2 to continue documenting. I opted for patience, pressing 2 in my mind, determined to ensure that nothing was left to chance. In that silent, grim moment before takeoff, as I sat surrounded by the tangible proof of my betrayal, I realized that my life was unraveling in ways I had never anticipated. Yet, beneath the despair and the shock, a cold, calculating resolve was taking root, a resolve that whispered that Lena's deception would not go unpunished. Little did she know, the very assets she had thought to squander in her pursuit of a false dream were now being safeguarded and used as leverage against her. And so, as I closed the printed documents and secured them in a locked drawer, I made a silent vow that come tomorrow, when the plane took off to carry Lena and her lover into an uncertain new future, I would be the one in complete control of my destiny, ready to let the consequences of her betrayal be revealed for all to see. The unraveling had begun, and I was ready to play every move with the precision of a man who had nothing left to lose but everything to regain. I sat alone in the dim glow of my study, the printed evidence from last night still scattered across the table like remnants of a shattered dream, and my mind wandered back to the days leading up to our supposed overseas move, a move that had been sold to me as the ultimate promise of a brighter future, a new beginning painted in grand hues by Lena. I recalled with vivid clarity how, in the months before the flight, she had woven a tapestry of enticing promises and persuasive assurances, telling me that she had secured a promotion that would change our lives forever. Every conversation was laced with excitement as she spoke of the opportunities abroad, of a life filled with luxury and adventure. And though there had been a few fleeting moments when doubt crept into my heart, I had dismissed them as the trivial worries of a man who trusted his partner implicitly. Even as I had contributed my savings, liquidated cherished possessions, and sacrificed pieces of my identity to fuel our new beginning, those quiet warnings, subtle hints in her hurried phone calls, small discrepancies in her expense reports, and even an oddly expensive dinner that I could never quite place, had been pushed aside by my overwhelming hope and devotion. Now, as I sifted through the final messages and documents that confirmed my worst fears, I began to remember the excitement of planning our fresh start. I recalled the late-night conversations filled with dreams and the optimistic plans we had sketched out together, unaware of the deception that was already taking root. The memory of Lena's bright, persuasive eyes, the way she had convinced me that our sacrifices were worth the promise of a new life, was now tinted with the bitter taste of betrayal. I could almost hear her voice, warm and persuasive, painting a picture of endless possibility, a picture that I had clung to with every fiber of my being. But beneath that dazzling exterior, there were subtle signs I had chosen to ignore. The nervous glances as she mentioned secret business trips, the unexplained charges on our joint credit card that never quite added up, and the quiet admonitions from friends who had gently urged me to be cautious, to heed the small red flags that I had dismissed as the eccentricities of a driven woman. Now, with every document confirming that the job was a lie and our savings had been siphoned away for her secret escape with her lover, I was forced to confront not only the financial ruin that awaited me, but the emotional devastation of a future that had been nothing more than an illusion. At this juncture, I was presented with interactive choices within my own mind. Should I reflect on these long-ignored warnings and acknowledge that I had been too trusting, or should I allow my anger to blind me from the lessons of the past? Part of me wanted to delve into every instance I had brushed off, a moment here, a whispered concern there, to build a comprehensive record of sacrifices and mistakes, so that one day, if I ever needed to reconstruct the narrative, I could hold up the evidence of my silent warnings. I could almost see the interactive prompt in my mind. Press 1 to document every warning and sacrifice, or press 2 to focus on the present betrayal. I chose press 1, determined that if I was to rebuild my life, I must first understand exactly how I had been deceived. I began compiling a detailed journal of every warning I had received, each slight message from a concerned friend, every vague comment from Lena that hinted at secrets, and every inexplicable expense that had momentarily made me uneasy. As I typed these memories into my laptop, the screen filled with pages of text, each word a testament to the sacrifices I had made. The cherished heirlooms I had sold to raise funds for our move, the dreams I had let go of in favor of her tantalizing promises, and the very trust one had invested so deeply in our future. This meticulous record became not only a ledger of betrayal, but also a turning point in my journey toward reclaiming control. In that moment of introspection, another choice presented itself. Should I let this record fuel a desire for immediate revenge, or should I use it to strategize a measured counterattack that would secure my assets and restore my dignity? I resolved that it would serve as both, a tool for my legal battle and a reminder of the lessons I would carry forward. With each keystroke, I reaffirmed that the sacrifice I had made was not in vain, but rather the foundation upon which I would rebuild a future free from deception. I recalled the nights when Lena had painted our future as a dazzling mosaic of opportunity, convincing me that every hardship was a step toward a better life. Now, those memories were tainted by the knowledge that the very promise of a new beginning was a lie. Yet, in the quiet solitude of that study, amidst the scattered remnants of a shattered dream, I began to see that perhaps this betrayal was a catalyst, a painful yet necessary jolt that would force me to reclaim my identity and secure my future. I knew that as I continued to document every detail of her deception, I was arming myself with the power of knowledge, the kind of power that would not only serve as evidence in any legal battle, but also as a personal reminder never to allow myself to be so utterly betrayed again. In that reflective state, I vowed that the sacrifices I had made and the warnings I had ignored would become the cornerstones of my new beginning. I would build a life on the foundations of truth, where every financial decision was made with wary wisdom and every emotional investment was guarded by the hard-won lessons of betrayal. And as the hours passed, I felt the bitter sting of loss begin to transform into a quiet determination, a resolve to ensure that the new life Lena had promised us was nothing more than an illusion, and that my future, now solely in my hands, would be built on a bedrock of transparency, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of justice. With my evidence meticulously documented and my mind resolved, I closed my laptop, knowing that the path ahead would be arduous, but that every step would be taken with the unwavering strength of a man who had learned that the price of betrayal was steep, and that the only way to truly move on was to reclaim every piece of his shattered identity. I sat alone in the dim, unyielding silence of our living room the night before our scheduled departure, the air heavy with the weight of impending doom and betrayal, and as I scrolled through the bank statements on my laptop with trembling fingers, a horrifying realization slowly took shape in my mind. There was never a job waiting for me. Every cent of our shared savings, painstakingly accumulated over years of hard work and sacrifice, had been siphoned away in a series of meticulously executed transfers, a financial heist that left our future as nothing more than a mirage. The fluorescent glow of my computer screen illuminated my shocked face as I pieced together the fragmented records of unauthorized transactions, each line of numbers a silent testament to the betrayal I had always feared but never fully comprehended until now. My heart pounded in my chest with a mix of anger and disbelief as I reread the final email notifications and frantic messages that confirmed the worst. Lena had emptied our accounts to fund her secret escape with her lover, and the job she had promised me was nothing but a lie, a cruel fabrication designed to ensnare me in a web of deception while she prepared for a new life overseas. In that moment, I was faced with a series of choices, interactive moments in my own mind that would define the course of my actions. Should I call her immediately, demanding an explanation for this catastrophic breach of trust, or should I take a step back to quietly plan my next steps, gathering every shred of evidence for a future counterattack? The voice in my mind, a blend of rationality and raw emotion, urged me to scrutinize the evidence further, to secure hard copies of every bank statement and document, so that when I finally confronted Lena, I would have an unassailable record of her treachery. I hesitated for a long, agonizing moment, my hand hovering over the phone as if it contained the power to change everything. But ultimately I resolved that the best course was to safeguard the evidence first. I printed every document, each page coming out with the precise details of the unauthorized transfers, dates, amounts, account numbers, that left no doubt about the meticulous nature of her deception. My eyes stung with unshed tears as I arranged the papers in chronological order on the dining table, transforming our once warm home into a war room of betrayal and shattered dreams. The interactive prompt in my mind offered two distinct paths. One that urged me to demand an immediate explanation from Lena, confronting her in the fury of the moment, and another that advised a quiet, calculated approach, one that would allow me to consolidate my evidence and plan a strategy for reclaiming what was mine. I chose the latter, reasoning that any impulsive call in my current state might only serve to tip the scales further in her favor, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. I saved digital backups of every statement and secured the hard copies in a locked drawer, my actions deliberate and methodical as I committed to a course of measured retribution. In that long, heart-wrenching silence, I recalled the countless times I had trusted Lena implicitly, the dreams we had built together, the sacrifices I had made, including selling cherished possessions and liquidating assets, to support her vision of a new life abroad. Now, every promise, every whispered assurance, felt like a cruel lie designed to rob me of my dignity and leave me stranded in a foreign land with nothing but memories of a life I once knew. The stark glow of the printed evidence was like a mirror reflecting back the betrayal that had been meticulously orchestrated. It forced me to confront the reality that I had been nothing more than a pawn in her elaborate plan. I felt a deep, searing anger rising within me. A burning resolve to not let this act of treachery define me, but rather to become the architect of my own destiny. I sat there, the papers spread out before me like the remnants of a shattered future, and allowed my mind to wander through the interactive choices laid out before me. Call her now and demand answers, risking a volatile confrontation that might unravel my carefully gathered evidence, or continue to document every detail until I had built an unassailable case that would later serve as the foundation of my counterattack. I chose the latter, understanding that this betrayal, as profound as it was, would only serve as a catalyst for reclaiming control over my own life. With a deep breath that carried the weight of years of hope and trust now turned sour, I closed my laptop and stared at the silent, nearly empty room. The clock ticked ominously on the wall as I contemplated the next phase of my plan. I knew that tomorrow, while Lena and her new lover prepared to board a flight to a new life, I would begin the process of reclaiming what was rightfully mine, by any means necessary. Every piece of evidence, every carefully documented transfer, would serve as ammunition in the battle for my future. In that dark, heavy moment, as I secured the final printouts and arranged them in a safe place, I made a silent vow. I would not allow this betrayal to break me. Instead, I would use the truth as a weapon to dismantle the illusion of the new life Lena had so arrogantly promised. I resolved to protect my name, my assets, and my future with every ounce of the determination that had been forged in the crucible of her deceit. As the night deepened and the final remnants of hope mingled with the bitter taste of betrayal, I sat there with the evidence of my ruin spread out before me, knowing that the night before the flight was not just a moment of personal despair, but the starting point of a long, arduous journey toward retribution. A journey where every decision would be weighed carefully, every action would be measured, and the seeds of my comeback were already sown in the silent, unyielding proof of her treachery. I entered the living room with a heavy heart and a mind reeling from the avalanche of evidence I had meticulously gathered over the past weeks, each piece a silent testimony to Lena's duplicity and every unexplained expense, every secretive phone call, now forming an impenetrable wall of truth that I could no longer ignore. The air was thick with tension as I waited for her, the dim light of dusk seeping through the curtains and casting long shadows across the room, each one a spectral reminder of the promises we had once made. When Lena finally appeared, Her face was a mask of calm that belied the storm brewing behind her eyes. There was a coldness there that I had never seen before, as if the very fabric of the love we had shared was beginning to fray. My pulse pounded as I cleared my throat, summoning every ounce of the resolve I had painstakingly built up, and I asked her, in a voice that trembled with barely restrained emotion yet was laced with an undercurrent of steely determination, "Lena, we need to talk?" She hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping as if she knew the words were coming, and then she murmured something about a misunderstanding that I was no longer willing to entertain. I felt the weight of every red flag, the lipstick-stained glass, the unexplained trips, the secret messages, and I realized that the illusion of our future was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated deception. I continued, "I know about everything. I know the truth." At that moment, I was faced with an internal choice. Should I let my anger overwhelm me and launch into an emotional outburst that might shatter any remaining hope of regaining control, or should I maintain a composed demeanor, my voice measured and my eyes unyielding, as I forced her to confront the consequences of her lies? The memory of the countless nights I spent in my study, poring over documents and financial records, urged me to choose composure over rage. I needed every shred of evidence to be his weapon, every moment of weakness from her to be recorded for my own legal protection. So I chose steely resolve, my voice rising only as much as necessary to ensure that she understood the gravity of the situation, and I continued, "I have proof, Lena, proof that every promise you made, every assurance you whispered, was a lie designed to empty our savings, to steal our future, and to leave me alone in a world that you have already abandoned." As I spoke, I watched her face contort with a mixture of shock and resignation. The confident smile that had once defined her now replaced by a haunted look, as if the truth were a burden she could no longer bear. My eyes scanned her features, searching for any sign that she might break down, and I felt a momentary impulse to record this confrontation, to capture every tremor in her voice, every flicker of guilt in her eyes. An interactive voice in my mind presented itself. Record this conversation for posterity so that every word could be used as undeniable evidence, or rely on my own memory to recall the details later. I hesitated, weighing the potential risks and benefits, and ultimately decided that in this critical moment, I would discreetly activate a hidden voice recorder that I had previously set up, a tool that would ensure that her confession, however partial, would be preserved in its raw form. Lena's eyes darted to the device, and for a brief moment, I saw a flash of panic before she regained her composure. "John, you don't understand," she began, her voice faltering as if trying to weave a final tale of justification. "I never intended for it to go this far. It was all supposed to be a new beginning, a way to break free from the constraints of our life that wasn't working for me." Her words, delivered in a tone that dripped with feigned remorse, were like acid on my already scarred heart. I interrupted her sharply, "Don't lie to me, Lena. I know about the job that never existed, about how our savings have been siphoned off to fund your escape with your lover. I know you sold everything, and you planned it all while I trusted you with my life." The room grew eerily silent as my words hung in the air, every eye in the room fixed on us as if witnessing the collapse of a once sacred union. In that moment, Lena's mask of false composure began to crack. Her eyes, which had once sparkled with a seductive charm, now glistened with unshed tears and a dawning terror of the inevitable truth. John, she stuttered, and her voice trailed off into a choked silence that spoke louder than any words could. I pressed on, "You deceived me in love, in trust, and in every promise you made about our future together. You took everything we had, our home, our savings, our dreams, and you threw them away for a life that you thought would set you free. Now, face it, your betrayal has shattered every ounce of trust one had in you, and there's no coming back from that." Every word was delivered with a cold, unwavering conviction, a stark contrast to the warmth that had once defined our union. I felt the weight of every sacrifice I had made, the late nights, the endless hours of work, the dreams I had allowed to intertwine with hers, and now they lay scattered before me, trampled by the harsh reality of her duplicity. As she faltered, her expression a mixture of regret and defiance. I was once again confronted with the interactive choice. Let my emotions boil over in an outburst that might bring her to tears, or maintain my composure and let the evidence speak for itself, cementing the betrayal in cold, unyielding fact? I chose the latter, for I knew that in order to reclaim control of my life, I could not allow my grief to cloud my judgment. Record every word, Lena, I said quietly, the hidden recorder capturing every syllable, so that the truth is undeniable and there is no escape from the consequences of your actions. With that command, I watched as her eyes widened in a final, futile attempt to salvage some shred of dignity, but it was too late. Every secret, every lie was now documented, and the weight of my betrayal was sealed in digital memory. The conversation, punctuated by her halting confessions and my relentless demands for the truth, became a turning point that shattered the remnants of trust that once bound us together. By the time our exchange ended, Lena's facade had crumbled completely, leaving behind a woman haunted by the irreversible consequences of her choices. In the silent aftermath, as I gathered my thoughts and the recorder captured the last of her broken words, I realized that this was the moment when everything had changed, when the future was irrevocably rewritten by the stark, unyielding truth of betrayal. And as I left the room that day, every step I took was a quiet vow. A vow to reclaim my life, to secure every asset and every memory, and to ensure that the deception that had once shattered my trust would be met with the full, unyielding force of retribution. I found myself standing in the silent ruins of our once shared home, a place that now felt as empty as the promises that had been made. The day before our flight was supposed to be the start of a new life, a fresh beginning in a far-off land where Lena had painted a dazzling picture of a promotion that would change everything. Instead, I discovered that the job waiting for me was a lie, and our savings, years of hard work and sacrifice, had been completely emptied to fund her secret escape with her lover. I wandered from room to room, each echoing footstep a reminder of everything I had lost. The living room, once filled with laughter and soft conversation, was now a cold mausoleum of discarded memories. Every object in the space, every piece of furniture, every sentimental trinket that I had painstakingly gathered over the years had been sold off or removed without so much as a goodbye. I sat on the edge of the worn sofa, the silence nearly deafening in its finality, and I felt a profound emptiness settle into the marrow of my bones. A void not only of material things but of trust, of shared dreams, of the future we had once envisioned together. In that moment, a mix of anger and desolation surged within me, mingling with a bitter realization that Lena had, with deliberate calculation, stripped me of everything I held dear. I recalled the countless nights spent planning for our overseas move, the long discussions about opportunities, and the sacrifices I made, selling cherished possessions and liquidating assets to support her vision of a better life. All of it now felt like a cruel mirage, a promise that was never meant to be fulfilled. As I sat there, surrounded by the cold evidence of her betrayal, interactive thoughts began to swirl in my mind. Should I confront Lena immediately with the evidence of her treachery, unleashing my fury in a torrent of accusations, or should I bide my time, letting the shock subside as I methodically plan my next moves? Another choice pressed on me. Should I document every detail of this emptiness, every regret, every tear that fell in the solitude of the night? Or should I channel the pain directly into action, transforming it into a weapon that would ensure I reclaimed my life and dignity? I chose to document, knowing that every piece of evidence, every minute detail of our financial and emotional collapse, would later serve as the foundation for my counterattack. I began writing down the sequence of events, the final email confirming the empty savings, the screenshots of bank statements that showed unauthorized transfers, and the messages from friends hinting that Lena had always been too secretive about her finances. With each word I penned, I felt the embers of betrayal ignite a slow-burning determination inside me. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. Instead, I would forge a new path out of the ruins, a path paved with the cold, hard truth of her deception. The emptiness that once threatened to crush me gradually transformed into a catalyst, a force that compelled me to take back control. I started by gathering every shred of evidence from our home. Receipts, bank statements, emails, and even the whispered conversations I'd overheard when Lena thought I was asleep. Every document I collected was a silent testament to the years I had trusted her, a trust that had been shattered in the most brutal way imaginable. In that painful, desolate moment, the interactive choices in my mind became clear. I could either succumb to despair and allow the void to consume me, or I could channel the raw pain into a meticulously planned vengeance that would leave no doubt that I was not a broken man, but a man reborn in the fires of betrayal. I resolved that I would not let this emptiness become my end. Instead, I would use it to fuel the road to vengeance. I began reaching out to trusted advisors, old friends, legal experts, financial analysts, each conversation carefully measured and deliberate, as I pieced together a strategy to reclaim my assets and expose Lena's treachery. I documented every sacrifice I had made over the years, from selling priceless heirlooms to liquidating investments, each one a painful reminder of how deeply I had invested my life in our shared dreams. Now, with that documentation in hand, I felt an unyielding resolve to set the wheels of retribution in motion. The road ahead promised to be long and fraught with challenges. Every step would require unwavering determination and the cold precision of someone who had nothing left to lose but everything to gain. I recalled the countless nights when Lena had dismissed my cautious warnings as mere paranoia, when I had tried to voice my concerns about unexplained expenses or secretive phone calls, only to be met with sweet reassurances that everything was fine. That sweet deception had now soured into a bitter truth, a truth that I would not let go unpunished. With every piece of evidence securely stored and every plan meticulously outlined, I stepped away from the hollow shell of our former home, not as a broken man, but as someone reborn from the ashes of betrayal. My heart, once heavy with sorrow, now beat with the rhythm of calculated determination. I vowed to follow the trail of stolen savings, to trace every dollar that had been siphoned away, and to use that evidence to secure not only my future, but also to ensure that Lena's deception was exposed for all to see. In that moment, as I locked the door behind me, I made an unspoken promise to myself. I would reclaim my life, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, until every last remnant of her betrayal was purged from my existence. The emptiness that had once threatened to define me was now the very fuel of my vengeance. A quiet, relentless drive that would lead me down a road where justice, hard-won and uncompromising, would ultimately pave the way to a new beginning. In the sterile quiet of my home office, surrounded by stacks of printed bank statements, receipts, and encrypted chat logs, I began the meticulous process of following the financial trail that Lena had so artfully concealed. Each document was a piece of the puzzle, a silent testament to the betrayal that had drained our savings and shattered the dreams I once believed we shared. The soft hum of my computer and the occasional click of the printer filled the room as I painstakingly reviewed every line of our financial history. I recalled the first anomaly, an unexpected transfer on a day when Lena claimed to be on a business trip, a transfer that I had dismissed at first as an error. But as I dug deeper, comparing the timestamps and cross-referencing account numbers, it became painfully clear that these were not mere mistakes but calculated moves. Every authorized transaction was now under suspicion, every expenditure meticulously redirected to a hidden account that only Lena seemed to control. I could almost hear the interactive prompt in my mind. Press 1 to follow the largest transfer, or press 2 to scrutinize the recurring small expenses? I opted for both, starting with the largest sum that had mysteriously disappeared from our joint account on a chilly autumn morning. That transfer, like a siphon, had emptied nearly half of our life savings into an offshore account with a bank I had never even heard of. With trembling fingers, I downloaded the transaction details and traced the trail through layers of intermediaries and shell companies, each step revealing more of the web of deceit. I found that the money had been funneled through a series of carefully orchestrated transfers, each one engineered to obscure the true destination and to evade any prying eyes. Every time I uncovered a new link in this chain, I felt both a surge of vindication and a mounting rage that threatened to overwhelm me. I could feel the weight of every penny lost, every promise of a better future that had evaporated into thin air. and I knew that these documents would serve as the ultimate proof of her betrayal. My investigation did not stop at the largest transfer. I shifted my focus to the recurring, seemingly insignificant expenses, those small withdrawals that, when aggregated, accounted for a substantial portion of our funds. I pored over digital statements, cross-referencing dates with Lena's reported whereabouts, and discovered that these expenses were made in the early hours of the morning, at locations that Lena had conveniently never mentioned. I mapped them out on a digital calendar, noting that they often coincided with days she claimed to be away on business. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental. Every expense, every cash withdrawal from ATMs in different cities was part of a broader strategy to siphon money away from our shared life. The more I delved into the data, the more I realized that Lena had orchestrated these transfers with a precision that was almost surgical. Every small sum meticulously recorded and hidden behind a facade of legitimacy. It was as if she had built a secret financial world, one that existed parallel to the one I believed we shared. I saved every digital backup, printed every statement, and organized them chronologically in a thick folder labeled Evidence. The process was painstaking and maddening, yet with each new revelation, I felt a sense of control returning to me, a control that had been stripped away by her deceit. I could almost see an interactive choice materializing. Press 1 to contact an old colleague who specializes in financial fraud, or press 2 to continue tracking the small transactions yourself. I hesitated, weighing the risk of exposing my investigation to an outsider against the benefits of expert advice. In the end, I decided to reach out to my old friend and former financial analyst, a man whose acumen in uncovering hidden money trails had earned him respect in the industry. Over a hushed phone call, I laid out the details, and his measured tone confirmed what I already suspected. Lena's methods were sophisticated, designed to be untraceable, and every ounce of our savings was being redirected to fund her secret escape. His advice was simple. Document everything meticulously and prepare to use this evidence to reclaim what was mine, both legally and financially. Armed with his insights, I began a deep dive into every digital record, every transaction that had once seemed trivial now illuminated by the cold logic of fraud. I traced funds through international wire transfers, noted the subtle differences in bank codes, and uncovered hidden fees that had been deducted at every stage of the transfer process. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that this was not a series of errors or oversights, but a deliberate scheme. A grand orchestration of lies meant to leave me destitute and alone in a foreign land while Lena fled with her lover. Each detail added another layer to the narrative of betrayal I was constructing, one that would eventually serve as the backbone of my legal case and my personal retribution. I began to compile a comprehensive dossier, a digital vault of evidence that I could eventually present to the authorities. Every spreadsheet, every annotated receipt, and every cross-reference bank statement was stored with absolute precision. I even considered an interactive prompt. Press 1 to document these findings in a detailed report, or press 2 to confront Lena immediately with this evidence. Again, I chose patience, knowing that immediate confrontation would only play into her hands. Instead, I would let the evidence accumulate until it was overwhelming, a tidal wave of truth that would wash away any remnants of deception. In that quiet solitude, with the weight of each discovered transaction pressing down on me, I began to see the true scale of the betrayal. Lena had not merely emptied our savings. She had meticulously dismantled the financial future we had built together, converting our shared dreams into a labyrinth of secret accounts and hidden transfers. The irony was profound. The financial discipline I had always prided myself on, the careful management of every dollar, had become the very tool that now allowed me to turn the tables. With every document I secured, every backup I made, I felt my resolve harden. I knew that this detailed record of her deceit would be the key to reclaiming my life, to ensuring that no one else would suffer as I had. In the end, the financial trail of lies was not just about money. It was a narrative of betrayal, a cold, calculated betrayal that left nothing untouched. And as I finally closed my laptop, surrounded by the silent evidence of a future stolen, I made a solemn vow that I would use every piece of this damning evidence to expose the truth, to reclaim my financial independence, and to ensure that Lena's carefully constructed web of lies would be unraveled, leaving behind only the unyielding power of truth and the promise of a future built solely on my own terms. I knew that my next move would have to transcend the personal realm and enter the legal and federal arena, where the cold, unyielding power of evidence would force the truth into the light. In the days following the unraveling of our finances and the meticulous documentation of Lena's betrayal, I resolved that it was time to take the battle to a level where my silence could no longer be mistaken for weakness. With the dossier of bank statements, transaction records, and encrypted messages securely stored and organized, I reached out to my mentor, a respected figure in the business world, and to a trusted lawyer who had stood by me through previous challenges. The phone call with my lawyer was a quiet affair, conducted in the early morning hours when the world was still asleep, and every word I uttered was measured and precise. "I have evidence," I told him, my voice low and resolute, "evidence that confirms not only the siphoning of our savings, but also a series of unauthorized financial maneuvers that constitute fraud on a sophisticated scale." He listened intently, his silence punctuated by the rustle of papers in his office, and when I finished, he assured me that with such irrefutable documentation, we had every right to engage federal authorities. That promise lit a spark of cautious hope within me, though I knew well that this was merely the beginning of a long, arduous process. My mind presented interactive choices as if on a virtual console. Should I submit the entire dossier to the FBI immediately, or should I first secure additional corroboration from a financial expert? I chose to err on the side of thoroughness and contacted an old colleague known for his expertise in financial fraud, someone who had once assisted me in deciphering complex offshore transactions. In a hushed conversation held in a secure location, he confirmed that Lena's financial maneuvers bore all the hallmarks of a deliberate scheme designed to misappropriate funds, and he urged me to provide every detail to the authorities. With my conviction strengthened, I proceeded to compile a final, comprehensive report that not only cataloged every unauthorized transfer and suspicious expense, but also connected them in a clear, chronological narrative of deception. I personally emailed this report to my lawyer and a select group of federal agents whose reputation for handling corporate fraud was well known. The moment I pressed send on that email felt like a final sealing of fate, a digital signature that would now bind Lena and her co-conspirators to the inevitable scrutiny of the law. As the hours passed, I received discreet updates from my legal team. The SEC had taken notice, and federal agents were now sifting through the evidence I had provided. I sat in my office, the glow of my computer screen reflecting the gravity of the moment, and listened to the soft buzz of incoming messages confirming that the case was gathering momentum. The media had not yet caught wind of the scandal, but I knew that once it broke, it would be a tidal wave. I envisioned headlines splashed with words like "corporate fraud scandal exposed" and "betrayal at the highest level," and I felt a cold satisfaction that the truth, once hidden in the shadows of personal betrayal, was now marching toward public vindication. At that moment, I contemplated another interactive choice in my mind. Should I issue a public statement outlining the steps I had taken to protect the company and my assets, or should I let the legal process run its course quietly, letting the evidence speak for itself? I decided that silence would be my ally. I would not further fuel the media frenzy, for I knew that my meticulously documented evidence would be the only language that mattered when the federal investigation unfolded. My days became a blend of vigilant monitoring and strategic planning, as I prepared for a potential courtroom showdown that would force Lena and anyone who had enabled her deception to face the full force of justice. I kept a low profile, yet every interaction with investors, business partners, and even friends carried a weight of quiet determination, as they saw in my measured responses the calm resolve of a man who had weathered a storm of betrayal and emerged unbowed. Each discreet update from my lawyer was like a heartbeat confirming that the federal machinery had begun to turn, that the evidence I had painstakingly gathered was now an unstoppable force. I spent evenings reviewing the intricate web of financial transactions, cross-referencing them with the detailed notes I had kept, ensuring that no detail was left to chance. My home office, once a place of solitary reflection and bitter memories, now pulsed with the energy of calculated strategy, a fortress of facts built to withstand any counterargument. I even began drafting a personal memo to myself, a reminder that the road ahead would be long and fraught with legal battles and public scrutiny, but that every step taken was a step toward reclaiming not only my financial independence but also my dignity. The transformation of my life had reached a critical juncture where personal heartbreak had merged with corporate warfare, and I had become the embodiment of resilience. A man who had turned betrayal into evidence and evidence into a weapon of justice. As I gazed out of my window at the sprawling city below, its lights a testament to endless possibilities, I felt an unyielding certainty that the federal investigation would soon expose the full extent of the fraud, leaving no room for Lena's lies to persist. In that moment, I embraced the burden of truth with a quiet, unwavering determination, fully aware that the journey to vindication had only just begun, and that every decision I made from that point onward would solidify the foundation of a future defined by integrity and unassailable strength. And so, with the cold, clinical weight of evidence in my hands and the promise of justice on the horizon, I prepared myself for the legal battle that would redefine my life, knowing that in the arena of law and truth, betrayal could never remain hidden forever. I sat before my computer in the solitude of my new study, the hum of the machine a steady reminder that the digital realm, with all its hidden corridors and encrypted secrets, could be as lethal a weapon as any physical document. The previous weeks had been a whirlwind of financial maneuvering and legal restructuring, each step carefully calculated to isolate every asset from Lena's treacherous grasp. Yet I knew that the ultimate challenge lay ahead in exposing the full extent of her betrayal, a betrayal that extended far beyond the draining of our savings into secret accounts and into the deeper layers of deception that linked her lover to a network of financial fraud. With the cold, methodical determination of a man who had already rebuilt his world from the ashes of betrayal, I resolved to launch a digital counteroffensive. I began by accessing our shared email accounts and scrutinizing every message that Lena had sent or received in the weeks leading up to our overseas move. I recalled the subtle inconsistencies, the messages that she had deleted in a rush, the attachments that had vanished in the blink of an eye, and I was determined to uncover the digital footprint of her deception. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I combed through deleted folders, using recovery software and bypassing security protocols that Lena had assumed would keep her secrets safe. Each recovered email, each hidden attachment, served as another thread in the intricate web of fraud and betrayal that I was unraveling. I discovered numerous messages between Lena and an unknown recipient, a series of emails that discussed secret meetings, unaccounted for financial transfers, and even references to an escape fund that was curiously absent from any legitimate record. One email in particular caught my attention. A brief, almost casual message where Lena mentioned that a certain transfer was just a little something extra for when the time came, a phrase that now reeked of cold calculation. I knew that this was the evidence I needed to expose not only her betrayal but the deeper financial manipulations that implicated her lover as well. My mind presented an interactive choice. Should I broadcast this evidence immediately to Lena's entire network, sending a viral email chain to every business associate and friend, or should I hold the evidence for a more strategic moment when it could be leveraged in a legal setting to secure my assets and tarnish her reputation definitively? I weighed the risks and benefits carefully. Immediate exposure could lead to a media frenzy that might spiral out of control, while a measured, strategic release would allow the evidence to be integrated seamlessly into the larger federal investigation. I chose the latter, opting to first consolidate every digital file and store them in an encrypted folder with a backup on an isolated server that Lena would never be able to access. With that task complete, I turned my attention to her online financial activities, using tools from my previous work as a cautious, yet innovative, method of digital forensics. I traced transactions, log files, and payment histories that Lena had taken great pains to conceal behind layers of virtual anonymity. There were discrepancies in the timestamps and IP addresses, traces of transactions that originated from locations far removed from our home country, and even evidence that her lover had accessed our joint accounts at odd hours. I exploited weaknesses in the security protocols she had assumed were impregnable. Her habitual reuse of a particular password on multiple platforms became my gateway into downloading log files and hidden account histories. Each file I retrieved, each piece of digital evidence, was a nail in the coffin of her carefully maintained narrative. My mind buzzed with the interactive prompts. Press 1 to document this discovery for legal use, or press 2 to further investigate the digital trail for additional proof. I opted to investigate further, knowing that every additional piece of information would only fortify my case. As I delved deeper, I uncovered a series of suspicious transactions. Small, seemingly insignificant withdrawals that, when aggregated, amounted to a substantial sum. They were all made at unremarkable ATMs located in different cities, a pattern that suggested a well-orchestrated scheme to siphon funds quietly away from our accounts. I compiled the data into a detailed spreadsheet, correlating dates, times, and amounts with Lena's reported whereabouts and the locations of those ATMs. The picture was as clear as it was damning. Every unauthorized withdrawal was part of a larger strategy to dismantle our financial stability and fund her secret escape with her lover. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction knowing that I was reclaiming my narrative through these digital breadcrumbs. Each piece of evidence was irrefutable proof that her betrayal was systemic and calculated. In the midst of this digital counteroffensive, I also encountered encrypted files on her personal computer, files that contained correspondence between her and an unknown party. With the aid of decryption software and a few hours of painstaking work, I finally unlocked their contents. The messages were terse and clinical, detailing the logistics of a covert financial operation, and one email in particular mentioned finalizing the funds transfer and ensuring that nothing remains traceable. It was as if every line was written with the intent to erase any evidence of her duplicity once she had succeeded in her escape. I saved these decrypted messages as well, knowing that when combined with the bank statements, the digital logs, and the recovered emails, they would form a damning dossier. I reflected on the irony of it all. The very tools of our modern world, designed to connect and inform, had become the instruments of her downfall, and I, once the unsuspecting husband, was now the master of this digital battlefield. I set up multiple backups, stored in different encrypted drives, ensuring that even if one were compromised, the evidence would survive intact. The sense of control I now experienced was intoxicating. Every click, every retrieval of hidden data was a step toward reclaiming not just my finances, but my dignity. In the quiet solitude of that night, illuminated by the soft glow of multiple monitors and the steady hum of hard drives, I realized that this digital counteroffensive was more than just a means to an end. It was a transformation of power. Lena had thought that by emptying our savings and running off with her lover, she could erase the past and begin anew without consequence. But the digital trail she left behind told a different story. A story of calculated moves, of small betrayals that compounded into a grand tapestry of deception. As I finished compiling the final report, I allowed myself a moment of introspection, feeling a mixture of sorrow for the loss of trust and a cold, unyielding resolve to use every bite of evidence as ammunition in the legal and personal battles ahead. I saved my work, encrypted it, and sent it to my legal team with a brief message indicating that the time had come to unveil the full extent of her digital deceit. The interactive choice was clear. The evidence would not remain hidden, and the truth would be broadcast at the precise moment to maximize its impact. With that final act, I felt the scales of justice tip ever more in my favor, and I sat back, knowing that the digital counteroffensive had not only exposed her betrayal, but had also set in motion the mechanisms that would ensure my eventual vindication in the eyes of the law and the public alike. I sat in the quiet of my modest new home, a place I had built piece by piece from the ashes of betrayal and shattered dreams, and as I reflected on the long, arduous journey that had led me to this final moment of transformation, I could feel the weight of my past slipping away with each measured breath. In the months since that fateful night, since the moment I raised my final glass of wine and whispered, "I always win," as Lena and Ava were consigned to history, I had spent countless hours piecing together not only the evidence of their treachery, but also the scattered remnants of my own identity, which had been so brutally undermined by a betrayal I had never truly seen coming. Each morning, I rose with a renewed sense of purpose, determined that the lessons of deception and loss would no longer dictate my destiny. Instead, I embraced the painful truth that I had been forced to endure and used it as the cornerstone of my rebirth. I began by reasserting control over every aspect of my life. I restructured the business that had once been tarnished by the chaos of Lena's deceit, transforming it into an empire that reflected my values of integrity, discipline, and meticulous planning. I reached out to old colleagues and forged new alliances with those who admired my steadfast resolve, and slowly, the fractured pieces of my professional world started to merge into something formidable and self-sustaining. With every contract renegotiated, every asset secured, I felt the sting of betrayal recede, replaced by the steady rhythm of financial and personal renewal. I set up daily routines that reinforced my newfound strength, morning runs that cleared my mind, long hours spent poring over strategy documents, and evenings dedicated to reading and reflection. I made interactive choices for myself, each decision a small act of defiance against the past. I chose to forgive not for her sake, but to free myself from the burden of lingering bitterness. I chose to surround myself with people who valued honesty over pretense. I chose to invest in ventures that promised not just profit, but also personal growth. There were moments, quiet and solitary, when I would sit by the window and watch the city come alive at dawn. Each light a symbol of possibility and every passing moment a chance to redefine who I was. I documented these reflections in a leather-bound journal, each page filled with memories of pain intermingled with the sparks of hope, serving as a testament to the fact that even the darkest nights can yield the brightest mornings. I reached out to those who had stood by me in silence throughout the ordeal, old friends who had offered discreet support when I needed it most, and even a few family members who, despite their initial shock at my public humiliation, now expressed admiration for my quiet determination. In one particularly moving moment, my sister, who had once clutched my hand in a mix of anger and pity, finally looked me in the eye and said, "I'm proud of you, John. You've turned your pain into something powerful." That simple acknowledgement became a beacon, guiding me forward even when the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. I found solace in the small victories, a successful business deal, a project completed on time, even a rare smile exchanged with a stranger on the street. And each one reaffirmed my belief that I was not defined by the actions of those who had betrayed me, but by the strength with which I reclaimed my life. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world outside fell silent, I would replay the events that had shattered my trust and then meticulously outline my plans for the future, each step a deliberate move away from the shadows of my past. I began to mentor young entrepreneurs, sharing with them the hard-won lessons of vigilance and resilience, hoping that by guiding others, I could ensure that the cycle of betrayal would never claim another innocent soul. Slowly, the scars of the past faded into mere reminders of the trials I had overcome, and I found that the pain, once overwhelming, had given way to a profound clarity, a vision of a future built on the unassailable pillars of self-determination, hard work, and above all, truth. I started hosting small gatherings, not as grand displays of success, but as intimate celebrations of the simple joys of life. A hearty meal shared with friends, laughter echoing in a room filled with genuine affection, and the quiet comfort of knowing that I was finally free from the clutches of deception. As I raised a glass to my own resilience, I recognized that this new beginning was not an erasure of the past but a transformation, a metamorphosis born out of betrayal, tempered by loss, and ultimately defined by my relentless will to rebuild. In that final, reflective moment, as I looked out over the city with eyes unclouded by regret, I knew that I had become the master of my own destiny, a man who had reclaimed not only his assets but his very soul. And so, with the soft promise of dawn breaking on the horizon, I stepped into a future that was unequivocally my own, carrying with me the unyielding truth that the road to rebirth, though paved with hardship, ultimately leads to a new life defined by strength, integrity, and the quiet, unassailable power of forgiveness and renewal.